I was recently, browsing the news as one does, and I kept coming across a trend piece on a new Gen Z workplace trend called quiet quitting. So what this is apparently I'm going to read a line from Fortune magazine, which covered this trend recently. So they write. You're still performing your duties at work, but you're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life, because the reality is it's not. And then the article goes on to say that quiet quitting is part of a spreading trend that's basically telling people to take it easy at work, stop taking on added responsibilities outside of the role's description, or work extra hours. So we'll go ahead and throw up a plethora of headlines here because this really is something that I've been seeing all over. And I have a few thoughts on this, and then I'm gonna get your take as the sort of representative Gen Z spokesperson for this show. So quiet quitting. My thoughts when I first heard about this and read about it was number one, that as I think a lot of people who are watching this probably know, like we basically already have a labor term for something sort of similar to this, and that's work to rule. So I was thinking about that, and that of course means basically that you really only perform the duties that are explicitly laid out in your contract. You don't, you leave at 5 on the dot. You don't do a single thing outside of what is in your job description. And work to rule is actually one of my favorite kind of labor actions because it's just an official way of like being a total shit. But I do want to say, when it comes to this trend of quiet quitting, something else that occurred to me is that this isn't really work to rule, because work to rule is a labor action. It's a labor escalation tactic that takes place within a very specific framework of collective organized labor and collective action, right? And so the main point I wanted to make about quiet quitting, so to speak, is that much like the Great Resignation that kind of came before, I'm sure you all remember those trend pieces, it could be the case that more Gen Zers or whatever are feeling burned out or like don't want to hustle and grind or whatever and are kind of scaling back in this particular way. But I just think it's worth sort of stating, again, that a lot of people individually doing the same thing is actually not the same thing as collective labor action. A collective labor action is coordinated and organized. And I think the reason why, I felt compelled to say this because of or in the context of the spate of trend pieces is because we all remember what the Great Resignation trend pieces were like. And just like, Cale, do you remember how, even people who are labor historians or labor experts being like, is this a general strike? And I just think it's very important to like spell out the distinction. So that said, as our Gen Z spokesperson, please weigh in on quiet quitting.
Yeah, this is maybe the first time I've been called the Gen Z spokesperson. I'm not sure if I like this responsibility, but I guess I'll take it.
For today's show.
Yeah, just for today's show. Part of it just, it's kind of sad that it makes sense. Like, it's a very understandable thing that someone who, a middle-class Gen Z person, new to the workforce, looking, at job prospects and regular working conditions and reading a piece like this, like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. That it sucks that, it feels like you don't get, like, living standards are much lower for middle-class people today than they were even like 20, 30 years ago. So there's like, I think, a deep dissatisfaction. There's also there's been I think, not universal, but a significant kind of radical transformation of just kind of culture that we've experienced in the last 15 years or so, basically since the financial crash, where Gen Zers, like when they do polling, it's like half of all Gen Zers say that they support socialism, like, which is higher than any other demographic. There is like this general, even if it's not socialism, there's just a general dissatisfaction with work life and with kind of capitalist drudgery broadly in like very kind of amorphous whatever terms. And so it's like, it's sad that like the response to that, again, understandable that the response to that is just, I don't know, just like see if you can like get by, like kind of avoiding managers looking over your shoulder, or, if you're in a cushy, you can work from home, like clock in, respond to that one email or two, and then kind of just do what you can to get through the day and don't really, don't do anything more than you need to do. And that's all fine, but like the big upshot is that like that doesn't change the situation at all.
Right.
Like if that's your plan, if that's your strategy for dealing with the day to day, then that's going to be your strategy every single day for the rest of your working life, because that doesn't actually, like, if anything, like there's a higher chance that you'll get fired. And I'm not saying like you should, if you can like work less. Like if you are working too much, like that is a problem. But it's not something you can overcome individually in all cases. Sometimes you can. Very often, like the larger trends are only going to be dealt with by structural transformations of things like labor law, of workplace democracy, of like, do you have a union or not? It's these like the old methods of dealing with work are kind of just the right methods because they're the ones
they're tried and true.
Yeah. Well, because like all this other, like this article, the advice is something that could have been given 100 years ago, 200 years ago, probably was given over and over and over again. And so actually, as far as like which one works better, it's not that. It is the like, you do need greater collective action and workplace democracy.
Yeah. Obviously, I agree. And once again, like, just want to reiterate, what you said, that like people kind of like pulling back a little at work or, quitting their jobs or whatever, all totally understandable. And, I don't think, or, I'm not trying to say, or it's very, I don't think it's right to say, to scold people and be like, well, like you should stay in your bad job and like form a union or whatever. That's like a little bit too, like, that's a little too cut and dry. It's not always that easy. But I would just say, for people on the left, for progressives, for commentators or whatever, like, I just think it's really important to look at, these trends or whatever as exactly what they are, again, which is individual actions, and to not get overly excited and to be like, this is like some sort of like sign of brewing labor militancy, because it's actually the opposite.
Right. And I think there is a real place for like just personal advice, like that like people need to figure out how to get by in the day to day. And you're right that like it would be wrong for the left to just kind of say, well, shit, sorry, dude, you should be in a union. Like,
right. Yeah.
That
it's like, yeah, we
enough.
know, but that's not helpful.
Right. Yeah. The big problem is that like it's not enough just to know that. Like if only it was so easy as like people saying, oh wow, I guess I need a union, and therefore they get a union. Like obviously you do need to navigate the day to day, and like there is, again, a place for personal responsibility. Like these things are all obviously factors, but the overarching, when it comes to the level of society, why there's like think pieces about like people just are getting burned out. Like, how do you deal with it? Well, actually, we need to deal with the burnout, and dealing with the burnout and dealing with the workplace conditions, dealing with the long hours, the expectations of you doing 120%, and realizing, you can't actually really do it effectively. That at a structural systemic level, like you do need a systemic structural political response. You do need social democratic labor law. You do need unions. And but that's like the strategy for how you have a better situation, a better society. But how you actually deal with the situation, like, yeah, you probably should do a little less at work, honestly.
Right, yeah. Well, there you have it from the Gen Z spokesperson of at least today.
Yeah. What do the teens say today? Bet. No. What do they say? I don't.
It's not my generation.
I don't know the lingo. Period. That's it's
all right. Well,
it's giving Sanders.
Yeah. All right. If you like this video from The Jacobin Show, please hit like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks.